Anthem is just a gift that keeps on giving, huh? Kotaku recently released an article of Bioware employees accounting their experience working on the game, and as you can imagine, it was extremely messy and troubled from the beginning. And it kind of gives perspective on what went wrong with this game in the first place. The article breaks down a lot of issues and is quite long, so here's the rundown, although I highly recommend you reading it for yourself. When Anthem first started its development, it was kept as a huge secret in Bioware. Apparently, you needed a password just to access the wiki for basic information about the game. The original head of development, Casey Hudson, director of the beloved Mass Effect trilogy, had this idea of you and a group of friends going out in the world and surviving for as long as they could. Then they would regroup and talk about their experience. The world would be populated with monsters, everything would be randomly generated. As they stated, it would be Iron Man, but not as cartoonish. For the most part, the team at Anthem were really excited with what they were working on. Things were getting done. Dragon Age Inquisition was selling well, so the team that worked on that were added onto Anthem and things were going great until Casey Hudson announced his departure from Bioware in 2014. Anthem had lost its leader. To many, he was seen as the captain of the Enterprise at Bioware, and without him, many of the mechanics he had in mind would be difficult to fully implement. And this was barely the beginning of the problems they had. For those that are maybe unaware, the Frostbite Engine is the engine that EA uses for games like Star Wars Battlefront and Battlefield. This specific team at Bioware had never developed an online game. Star Wars The Old Republic was made by a completely separate division of Bioware, based in Austin, Texas, I believe, and they were never really consulted on how these kind of things work. Bioware had previously struggled heavily with working with the Frostbite Engine. The Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age Inquisition team had numerous problems implementing basic things such as a save system and a third-person camera. But I mean, they were able to make it work, so maybe, just maybe, the kinks had been worked out and this engine would be primed and ready to make Anthem, right? Well, let's talk about the Frostbite Engine real quick. According to staff at Bioware, the Frostbite Engine was developed outside of EA. So people had no clue what things were, where they were, and why they were even there in the first place. The whole engine felt completely hacked and Frankenstein together. Despite of this, the Anthem team was able to build the big beautiful world of Anthem that's been rightfully praised. They just weren't able to incorporate all of their ambitions and original ideas, mostly because they just didn't work with the Frostbite engine. Flying was removed and added in multiple times because it was either buggy and annoying or just plain unfun. Simple bugs that usually took less than a day in a functioning engine would be a week-long conversation because of the shoddiness of the Frostbite engine. Think about how ridiculous that is. An engine made solely for the purpose of making shooter games forced onto a company to make a third-person RPG adventure game without thinking of the hardcore technical limitations that would entail. The FIFA franchise is by far EA's biggest cash cow. FIFA 2018 sold over 24 million copies. There's also microtransactions well embedded into the game that surely rake in millions annually. So naturally, when the franchise made its move into the Frostbite engine, EA thought it would be a fantastic idea to move people from the already understaffed Anthem team over to EA. Any complaints that the Anthem team had were very quickly sent over to the Frostbite support team. Now, when it comes to support, divisions of EA had to fight for their time. That fight is one that Bioware usually lost because they put priority over Star Wars Battlefront and FIFA, because they made exponentially more money than Bioware, so developers' concerns were completely ignored. The team was fighting a horrible engine, and on top of that, the game had no vision due to this horrible engine. What else could possibly go wrong? Bioware has a tradition of letting developers and staff at EA play a demo of the game they're working on over the Christmas break, to get a nice, chilled, relaxed perspective on the game. EA executive Patrick Soderlund played it and said it was unacceptable, mostly criticizing the graphics and stating that this was not the game he was promised. By the way, he played the version without flying. So what this caused was about 6 weeks of crunch time. They redesigned the art style, improved the graphics, and most controversially, they added flying back. However, the team at Bioware had no idea whether or not flying was a temporary thing that was being added just to impress Patrick Soderlund, or if this was a permanent feature. That's how in the dark these poor developers were. They had no clue if a major feature was temporary or forever. Luckily, Bioware finally caught a break when they impressed Patrick Sunderland, who'd claimed the demo was fucking awesome. This demo would be the demo that was shown at E3 2017. You know, the demo that had basically been built from scratch, with features that the developers had no clue if that was even going to be in the game. Yeah, that one. After a quick name change from Beyond to Anthem, the game was finally shown at Microsoft's E3 2017 conference. The world, including Bioware staff, would finally see how Anthem was going to play. Bioware were surprised it looked as good as it did, but they were curious as to how on earth they were going to pull it off. Bioware announced a fall 2018 release date for Anthem, so the team had less than a year to get it together, and they hadn't even figured out how mission design would work. They barely had anything worked out. The E3 demo was mostly fluff and CGI that didn't actually exist in the game. So guess what that resulted in? With a game that was barely finished, a Frankenstein team from different studios that had no vision or direction, and a release date of less than a year, Mark Dara joined the project in the fall of 2017, and he changed the team's philosophy completely. All they cared about was releasing the game. He encouraged decision making and sticking to it, and he finally brought decisiveness to a team that had none. This made development go a lot quicker than usual. Gameplay was solidified and it finally felt like the game had a vision. At the start of 2018, it was very clear that the team wasn't ready for a fall release date. The game was barely ready, and there was a grand total of one mission that was ready and primed to go. EA would not let the team delay past March of 2019, the end of the first quarter for EA, so that meant that the team at Bioware had one final year to release their game in a playable state. Mind you, at this point, Anthem is barely past what could be even considered alpha, and that resulted in even more Bioware worked endless nights, weekends, and holidays just to make up for lost time. Many of the game's missions were designed in this time period, and the story underwent several rewrites. EA pumped so many developers into Anthem with one sole purpose: release now, fix later. Many Bioware staff stated that this is the most stressed they'd ever been by far. There was growing pressure from competition such as Destiny and The Division, which further added to this horrible development. Many features were cut, including a complex skill tree and a separate skill tree just for your pilot. Bioware couldn't test out the game they were making because they were on such a time crunch that there just wasn't enough time for it. The entire game was developed in its 6 to 9 months before its release, according to someone at Bioware, in which tons of staff left due to the high-stress environment and depression and anger running rampant all throughout the Bioware offices. Now let me state that this didn't take 6 to 9 months because they were done with the game. EA had put their foot down and said enough was enough and it was time to release this game. This is a service game and we can fix it later. So at the end of the day, Bioware finally released Anthem, and the team were praying. They were praying that the Bioware magic, as they called it, had finally worked its magic, and they could get a Metacritic score of at least a 70 to have some hope in salvaging this mess. Anthem was released to pretty horrific reception. Long, grueling loading screens, a general lack of optimization for PC and consoles, horrible loot and mission design, a story that lacked impact, and an incredibly bare-bones endgame. The game had an overall 55 Metacritic score, to the disappointment of many at Bioware, because despite all of the trouble development caused for them, the team thought that they had pulled it off and that Anthem was really something special. While this score is less than ideal, and obviously Anthem is proving to be a pretty bad failure, maybe that's for the best. Bioware stated that the development of Dragon Age Inquisition had the record for the most stressful development at the time. But because that game sold incredibly well, EA saw that as, hey, this kind of work cycle works and we can keep implementing this because it's going to make us some more money. And the team at Bioware were really hoping that Dragon Age Inquisition would actually flop so that it could spark some change in the industry. Maybe Anthem will inspire change in how EA and Bioware manage things. The story of Anthem is a story of gross incompetence, how multiple bad decisions and ignorance can not only lead to a bad game, but to unhappy employees and ruined reputation. I originally gave this game a 3 out of 10 and my score still stands, but after reading this article, I've gained a lot of insight and perspective about what went wrong here. Maybe there was one instance where Anthem was great in the many demos that were made of it, but we may never see it now because of its confused identity. Thanks for watching this video, guys. There were some things in the Kotaku article that I left out because I just felt like it wasn't all that important and I didn't want this video to be too long. I highly recommend you checking out this article for yourself because it's honestly shocking the stuff you learn about these developers and what they went through.